I have plenty of issues, but writer's block is usually not one of them. I've written thousands, maybe not thousands, about 1,000 production music tracks, so I have plenty of experience starting with nothing and then usually finding my way to something that I'm happy with. Now, if you asked me to write a song about my feelings and make an album of songs about my feelings and then go play those in front of people and share it with my friends, well, I'd curl up in a ball and not do anything. But if you say, write a song that could be used in a TV episode or on a commercial or a long-form internet storytelling video, there's a lot of those these days, I think I could knock something out fairly quick. I tried filming this video yesterday. I had every intention of writing a song and talking to you about writer's block while I did it, but I recorded for an hour and I was staring at the screen with my mouth open for most of the time, so I will cut in and out when it's appropriate. But what I want to do is go through somewhat of a checklist. Now, I don't always have a checklist that I go through in my brain when I'm writing a song, but there are 5 things. Since I always wear this black shirt, I can put like the titles across the screen. So 5 keys to 5 ways, 5 strategies to avoid writer's block. 5 tips. Do these 5 things and never have writer's block again. Hardest parts of YouTube, title and thumbnail. Just an FYI in case you want to go down this path. A quick audition of my track. I'll talk about instrumentation in a minute, but I will say that one of the instruments I used was my Meyer felt, which is on sale through August 31st at my website, and I also, of course, worked in the Feathered Flute on sale at Piano Book through the end of the month as well. So go check that out. Better? Tip or strategy, whatever, number 1, you have to think about the end user. Now, this is a large group of people. This is the top of an upside down pyramid. If this is the top of this is the top of the funnel, right? Advertising, commercials, television shows. There's so many brands that are using music and making long form content on the internet that really didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago, especially in the numbers that they exist now. Every brand has pages and pages of videos that talk about their product. But keep in mind, any type of music can be used in any type of scenario, wherever it works. So if you write for advertising, that doesn't mean it can't be used in broadcasting, vice versa. But you'll pick up on differences between the way the music works, and we'll talk about more of those as we work our way down the funnel of writer's block avoidance. Is that the title? But I usually try to simplify it. Advertising, and those are usually more bold. You hear it more, it's mixed louder. And then long form television, where I'm thinking about specific types of TV shows. That's usually in the background, more underscore-ish, not always, but that's a way that I can kind of divide what I'm doing. And usually I'm focusing a track or a group of tracks on one of those 2 areas. Tip number 2, research. This is the fun part. You get to watch television. Don't skip the ads. Listen to the ads, at least get 30 or 40 seconds into it. You know, the music that we like and the music that we want to make is not always, and most of the time it's not ever, the music that is being used in advertisements or in a lot of shows that we watch. That's why it's important to pay attention to what is being chosen and try to figure out why. There's almost always a why. There are going to be bad productions where people just choose music randomly and they don't have any taste. But most of the time, there is a thought process behind the track selection. For advertising, you can go to sites like iSpot.tv and see what's popular, see what's trending. But honestly, the best thing to do is just watch TV and watch broadcast television. Watch the main networks, because then you get the blocks of commercials from the big brands. And there's usually a trickle-down effect. You know, there's popular music, and then the ad agency world kind of catches up a year or 2 later, and then everybody else catches up after that. Now, when it comes to the television side of things, the long form programming, this is where we have to make some smart decisions on what we are watching. You know, a lot of programs have custom music, but I tend to focus on the networks that are using a significant amount of production music. Now, how can you tell? For instance, yesterday I was on Discovery Plus. Sometimes I worry about there not being enough outlets for our music, but then you go on Discovery Plus and you see all the networks and all the shows and realize there's plenty of places for our music to go. As you watch through an episode of one of the shows, say it's a home improvement show, you can usually tell that it's not custom. The tracks usually sound the same, maybe there's the same instrumentation, but in those moments where the music comes up, you can tell the guitars sound different and the drums sound different. But watching those shows will give you the best insight into what editors and directors are thinking when they choose production music. There are times where I have a theme already in mind, and so the research process is just me listening and thinking about that theme. But before I started writing this track, I was using the research phase just to see what was out there and decide what I wanted to write. And that leads to the third part, which I'm calling story. It's not really a tip, I guess, but story. Storytelling 101, every story and every show has an arc to it. A lot of these home improvement shows, they start out with everything's happy in the beginning, and then they buy a house and they find out there's mold in the house. And then they go through the process of fixing it. It's very formulaic, but we like it, and it's hard work. Things go wrong. You hit your thumb with a hammer and it hurts, and the music for that. And then the cute kids in the family walk in and they all have a meal or something. And then there's the moment where they reveal the house to the client. But as I was watching different shows, I was focusing in on that moment where things kind of go wrong. And I believe that would be called the inciting incident. And the music always changes, usually gets darker. And I said in my last video, you need to be writing upbeat music, and you do. But I don't like writing dark music. I think most of us do, if we're honest. But this is a way for me to justify writing music that might be a little dark and a little sad, but it's what I like. But what's important is that you can visualize scenes happening on top of your music. And you can think, oh, this is at the beginning, or this is more towards the middle, or this is towards the end. And that will affect, number 4, the behavior of your track. Behavior is a word that is very foreign to those outside of the production music business. If you talk to an artist, they typically aren't thinking about behavior. I guess there is a verse, chorus, bridge structure that's fairly common. But in production music, your songs need to behave in a certain way. Now, one common behavior is a building track. It starts small, builds to a medium section, and then a large section, and then maybe a small section to end it off. That kind of track is going to play a major role in the story because an editor can edit to that entire track. Those are fun to make. I've made a lot of those, and those have done quite well. But thinking about the track that I'm writing with this inciting incident theme, I'm just focused on that one part. And so my track might have some build to it. It might have some components that can be moved around and edited too. But for the most part, I need to stay in that emotion for 2 minutes because my track needs to be that long. But more than likely, the editor's only going to grab 30 or 45 seconds if I'm lucky. When you take a track like that and you audition the 30-second mark and then the 90-second mark, there needs to be a common thread. Not that it can't change, but it needs to be cohesive. And let's look about 30 seconds in. Now if we jump to the B section, and then even later on, as you can tell, there is a lift, and when you've been listening to the same track for hours, that lift seems quite large, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that big at all. And part of that behavior are what I like to call moments, edit points. In a big building track, that's really easy because you have your small section and then maybe a stop, and you swell into a medium section, and then you can do some kind of crazy thing going into the big section and out. But in a more subdued track, you still need to have those moments, but you can't take away from the overall vibe and feel of the track. With a background track, it's often more difficult to work in drops and swells without drawing too much attention to the music. Underscores are meant to serve the story. They're not necessarily meant to be the story. Here's my beginning. 1, 2, da da da. I want to make sure I give the editor something to use at the beginning. Notice in between the A sections, this is a very small moment. And then leading into what I'm calling the B section. I added that bar after the fact. I did not record that, but I felt like I needed something because an editor can easily go in right here. Keep in mind, editors, they use somewhat rudimentary tools, and they also have access to other tools. One, they've got dialogue going on, but they also have sound design a lot of the time, a bin full of sound effects and such. So perhaps they just want to go into this B section. They could start right here, fade into it, add some kind of whoosh or whatever, and cover that edit up completely. But at least that gives them an option to now go into this B section that's different from the A section. That might increase my chances that it gets used in multiple times during the same scene. Now in this track I also made a C section, which is basically it just hangs on the same chord and it has an extended build, but I added an additional moment before. One thing that I will often do is when I know I'm going to have sections in between sections, a drop, I'll make that drop 2 bars instead of a half a bar. And the reason I do that is because I will try to fill it in with something creative, but if it doesn't work, it's a lot easier to close down and make that a bar or 3 beats or 2 beats instead of extending it, because you have chords that roll out on the acoustic guitar, and if you mic'd something up, you don't want to go back and do it again. And then here's a moment at the end of the track. That's what I call my composed ending, right? I gave it a little bit of a lift at the end and then came to a very precise ending. Imagine going to commercial break, or imagine shifting to a new scene. It's just a subtle lift, it transitions over, and then we are somewhere else. And the 5th thing that I think about is instrumentation. Now, there are times when I'm making an album, if it's an acoustic guitar instrumental album, well, that's decided at step 1. But in this kind of scenario, I've gone through all of these processes, right? I'm thinking about the end user to, what's number 2? Research, story, behavior. You'd be surprised at how instrumentation is not as important. You can take instruments that may not go together, and as long as you're thinking about all of these other parts of the process, you can create something that works well. And if this is an advertising track, a lot of times the people in charge are looking for something unique and interesting. Now, all that being said, if all the tracks in the show that you're pretending to write for are acoustic guitars, ukuleles, and hand percussion, you probably don't need to deviate too far from that. Nylon string guitar is how I started this. This is the part that I started with. Basically that over and over again with click track bleed that I'm going to have to take out, but I think I can do that. Then we have the Meyer felt. Together with the nylon. There are elements that make the piano not sound that great by itself, but make it really nice in context. And then I added an additional Meyer felt part, which is heavy on the effects. And that comes in later on in this B section. Kind of a rolling arpeggiation. That's the idea behind this track, is there's a lot of movement. The nylon is moving really fast, the piano is moving fast, and all together it's moving, but nothing is really sticking out. Then there's this fun moment. Then the feathered flute, just to add that ambience in the back. I'm gluing it all together with this ethereal pad. And then synth bass, I use my basic all the time. It's one of my free prototypes you can go pick up for both Kontakt, the full version, and Decent Sampler. And you can see the mod wheel is connected to the low pass filter. So listen to it. We'll kind of skip to where it opens up a little bit more. filter is a way to make the track feel like it's opening up. And then I have this snare drum, which is a huge marching snare drum that an old roommate of mine from years ago left with me. With my left hand, I'm playing consistent. Almost sounds like a shaker because of the way those brushes work. And I'm adding a little bit more emphasis with my right hand. There's my track. I've taken what are limitless possibilities and put them in a very small box. And I've got these tools that I can choose from. And if I deviate from it, it's obvious. So that pulls me back into it. And why does this keep me from having writer's block? Because I have spent the last 30 minutes or maybe hours thinking about this, thinking about it in a very specific way. And if you do that, your mind gets locked into it. It's a lot more difficult to not have ideas than it is to have ideas. This process works for me, but if I miss something that works for you, please leave it in the comments and we'll talk soon.